With a career spanning almost 20 years, Victoria operates at the forefront of the intersection of technology and financial services. Now an incorrigible entrepreneur at Santander, Victoria has held senior marketing positions at leading fintechs that have since been acquired by the multinational bank. Victoria's presentation will show you how to plan, strategize, and implement large-scale innovation projects with a particular focus on practical steps and avoiding commonly found pitfalls. Please welcome Victoria Yasinetskaya.
Hello everybody, I'm Victoria and I'm Marketing Communications Director at the Global Cards business of Santander. So when we think about launching an innovative venture in a large, already established organization, we most likely imagine this. A young group of people, very vibrant, full of ideas, working together, sipping coffee or sometimes Red Bull to get them going, and coming out with some really good solutions at tackling that pain point of the customers that they would like to address. However, after a few years of time, the reality looks more like this. Unfortunately, the growth is not at the level that it was expected. The product may have a series of bugs that are very costly to resolve. And the most important thing, financing is running out. And there is not a very bright future ahead for that startup. And this has happened over the last decade in many organizations, in large, smaller, and what I have learned in my 15 years of experience of working in a fintech company at a scale-up phase, but also in Santander, we have launched a number of new businesses and fintech companies with the idea to compete with the real fintechs, independent out there that were really, eating away our existing business, coming out with those solutions that were much better and offering much greater customer experience. So that period of time has really taught a number of lessons that I would like to share today. And to be honest, there's nothing new. You probably know most of it. You've read about it in books. You've probably lived it yourself. So my objective here is to give you a flavor of what I have seen, both within the Santander ecosystem, but also observed in the banking industry, because I think it's very relevant also for the insurance industry. But also, just to remark, it is relevant for those of you that are representing large multinational organizations, but also for the startups, because there are some tips of how to deal and manage expectations of your investors and the stakeholders that are responsible for the future of your company. So, to group the ideas, I'm going to talk through the four categories, the four topics. So one would be the why. The second one, what. Third, who. And how. So let's look into each one of them and see what we can reflect on these subjects. So why? What I have seen is that not all innovative ideas and ventures have the same purpose. So most likely we would have a project, an initiative that we say we need to beat the competition. There are a lot of innovative players, new players in the market. Some are non-traditional. So in the banking sphere nowadays, it's not just banks competing against each other. There are fintechs, there is big tech. So Apple now is the company that we talk most about when we talk about the competition. It's not BBVA as it was in the past. So, yes, it is fighting the competition. It is coming with the right solutions for the customer pain points. It is about growth, but not always, right? Sometimes you create an innovation hub with the idea and with the purpose and the mission to learn about innovation processes, what type of teams you need to have in place, what needs to be simplified, etc. So that would be a different kind of spectrum and a different end goal of that venture. And also it's interesting to look at what are the goals. Are they short-term or long-term capital investments? Because based on that, you can really define, and set direction of where you're going. So I think at this phase, this is when you start setting the expectations of the stakeholders, creating that culture of innovation, because most likely you do need to take a role of an educator and bring everybody on the same page and create that culture of patience, and explain what is the life cycle of innovation and, how long does it take to see the results that you expect. And I think what is really interesting also to define what success looks like. Because, some may expect that, okay, you've launched the product, day one, you start generating, and acquiring customers, expanding all around the world. Great, I've seen it. And unfortunately, you need a lot of time in the beginning, and you need to be very patient. And I think it's very important that from day one, you have very clear expectations, and for each milestone, you define those KPIs, what they are. And most likely, at the very early stage, there are very different KPIs to what you're used to when you're talking about more mature products and more mature brands that are already out in the market. And I think it's also interesting to see in the why area is that what impact are we expecting for the big brand, right? For our mother brand. Is it a direct impact or indirect impact? I think that's also an interesting subject to evaluate at this stage. Next. What? The other day, I had a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine who was running a venture division within FIS, a large multinational financial services software provider. And we were debating, okay, is timing really the key thing? Because you may have the right product, the right solution, the right talent, have the capital, but if the timing is wrong, all of that is just not going to work out. So we came to a conclusion that you need the alignment of stars, right, of all those three things. Having the right solution for the pain point of the customers that you have identified, and of course, all the technology and all the talent that needs to execute. The capital that comes, in this particular case, if you talk about entrepreneurship, from the multinational that's behind it, and the timing. So here are a few examples that I would like to show. Most likely you know these brands. So Wise, previously called TransferWise, was really the first company that started in the fintech arena. And I think it was already a few decades ago that they did a lot of positioning as a bank-bashing organization. And they did a great job because they had a blue ocean situation. They had a lot of unhappy customers. They were tired and fed up of paying high fees to their traditional banks for making international money transfers. And they launched a great product, and they were iterating. And now it's not just about a B2C solution, but it's also a B2B solution or B2B2C. So I think their case is really spot on in terms of timing, but also the way they grew, and that they were very patient. And I think they did a great job managing the expectations of their investors because they didn't scale up rapidly. They had a few years of really trading the product, understanding what the customer pain points, and they still do on an ongoing basis. But that rapid growth happened only after 3-4 years of time of them being in the market. And I think it's a great example. So PagoFX. So this is the company that I used to lead. I was head of marketing and communications and branding. And it was a response of Santander to Wise and the likes of Wise. So basically, we realized that, yes, our customers in different countries, especially in the UK, where we have quite an important presence, they were going, or they were still with the bank, having a current account, mortgage, credit, but the international money transfers they were doing elsewhere because the offer was much better. Most importantly, lower price, better service, great app. So Santander launched PagoFX with the idea of having, a independent startup with the backing of the bank. Therefore, our value proposition was really unique in a sense because, yes, offering low-cost service, great and easy-to-use app, but with the security. So if you want to make a large amount and send it abroad because you're buying a house, let's say, then most likely you would prefer to do it with a brand that has a backing of a large organization. And, it was a great experience. We had the talent, we had the technology, we had the capital, but we launched in April 2020. Do you remember what happened back then? That was the first month of us being in the lockdown. and the COVID kicked in, right? So when we were doing all the planning and the business case, 2 years before that, of course, nobody would imagine the COVID situation. So, I mean, we still launched, we still went ahead, but of course, the numbers were not at the level. And what happened that the stakeholders, yes, they were willing to review the plans, etc., but they did not have the patience, let's say, of the new reality. So therefore, it was restructured. We used the team, we used the technology, and now there is another unit called Pago Next. You may have heard about it. Basically, it's a more B2B focused platform that develops a number of payment solutions for the more open market and more corporate world, not so much on the B2C side. And then Stripe, another great example of being very timely. So Stripe, what they did, they capitalized on the boom of the e-commerce, and they launched a payment gateway which was very developer savvy, and it was very easy to use for the small shops and more small e-commerce that were launching in the market. So it wasn't just the right product at the right point of time, but also identifying that blue ocean, as I love to call it, and I think they're doing a great job, and that was the reason for the exponential growth. So timing, something that we cannot control, right? Because you cannot imagine that things like COVID will happen, but that's normally the key success factor in a lot of startups. Third would be building a balanced team. And I think that's a very interesting reflection from my experience. So yes, you do need to bring fresh blood, as I call it, right? You have an organization that's very established. You probably have people that have been working there for 10 plus years. And you're like, okay, fine. If you want to innovate, if you want to think outside the box, we need to bring people from outside the industry, or maybe from other institutions that have lived that innovation culture and can bring new ideas, new processes into our organization. Yes. But at the same time, you need to mix these guys with those guys that really understand your industry, that really understand areas such as compliance, such as regulation, such as product approval, because without having that mix, you can be in an island that become very independent, and you will not be able to talk with the guys that are, let's say, in the mothership land. So therefore, I think it's very interesting to look at the case of Revolut. So Revolut, what they've done really well is that they have the profiles of traditional bankers, they call them suits, but they also have the pirates. So the pirates are those guys that really have brought the innovation culture and always the customer-focused way of doing things. And, they've been able to kind of navigate the waters. It hasn't been easy. The regulation in different markets where they were launching, it was shifting. So they really had to bring on board the people that knew how to navigate those regulatory and compliance waters, and they've been doing really well in that sense. And I'm sure they've learned, that mix was super crucial for them. And then the Lending Club, another example. So they launched as a peer-to-peer lending platform. And with time, they've seen that the regulation in the US was getting stricter. There were some changes in the rules. So they really had to pivot, and they really had to also bring in that talent that would help them operate in a new environment that they were not expecting at the first stage. And then at PagoFX, an example that I've lived. So we also, initially brought a lot of stars from Amazon, from PayPal, and those people were very creative. I remember we learned a lot about the hiring process, the product approval process, the importance of UX, the whole idea of doing marketing in a very different way, leveraging all the digital marketing channels that are out there. And it was great. And then we also had people that came from the bank itself that knew very well how to navigate. However, I feel like at the leadership level, we lacked a little bit those profiles that were able to navigate the relationship building with the rest. So I think my advice would be make sure that at the leadership level you do have the gurus of politics, because you still need to do politics, you still need to negotiate, you still need to, to go to those meetings and make sure that everybody's convinced about a direction that you want to take it, because otherwise, with time, you're not going to speak the same language. And just a little bit of who and the people behind, I think it's super important. I think that you bring that culture and you build that culture of innovation, even though you're part of a large ecosystem. But if you create a smaller team, it's important that that team has its own way of doing things. So here are a few examples of how we created the culture of PagoFX. And first, we definitely defined the mission, the vision, what were the key 5 values, and based on that, the leadership style. So all of us that were in the leadership team, we coordinated in a way that would make sure that the way that we talk with our employees and the way that we drive the project forwards will be more homogeneous and all going into the same direction. And here are a few values that were established, and I'm sure that may resonate with a lot of you. So first is balance agility with high standards. So when you're innovating, yes, you need to be fast, you need to grow fast, but at the same time, if you have regulators and compliance behind you, you need to make sure that whatever you do is done with high standards. And sometimes it's very tricky, because to get to the high standards, you need time. So that was a big battle there. So seek and offer help, and in collaboration, a lot of us talk about the importance of it. It's easier said than done, but that was definitely a number one. And embrace change and challenge. So I think we always were challenged, with different problems ahead of us, but we were keen to take it on. Customer delight, of course. I think any innovative product need to think about it, and diversity was definitely part of the culture. For example, I had a team that came from all the way from Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, Spain, UK, so it was really fun to work with really diverse teams. And fourth point is the how. So how to make sure that there is a fast track for everything that's got to do with product approvals, making sure that the compliance is on board on everything that you do, all the marketing communications that go out there. Because if you have to go through the same processes as normally is done, for a traditional, well-established organization, then you're not going to get there. Because it's all about fast execution, learning from the customer feedback, iterating and doing it again. And that cycle needs to be very fast. And however, I've seen that a lot of processes took just forever, and we were not in time, to keep up with the pace. And I think a few examples of who has done it really well, I would say Square. They've been very great in iterating, finding different niches, and they started with just a tool to be able to pay at e-commerce, and now they've expanded the variety of portfolio of products. Simple, as an example of a very good fintech and neobank that was one of the first to launch in the US. Then they were acquired by BBVA, and with time, everything got too complicated. The objective was to be simple, and then it was complex. And that's why they did not survive. And a few years ago, unfortunately, had to close. And Asto would be yet another example of a company that had a very good value prop, so invoice and expenditure management for small companies. And that was one of the ventures. We call them speedboats in Santander. But unfortunately, the process didn't quite work out, and they were not fast enough, to keep up with the pace, because they initially launched in the UK, and UK was a very competitive market, and there were a lot of players out there that were much more aggressive and much more rapid in developing the product. To conclude, if you launch a speedboat, make sure that you cut off the anchors of a large transatlantic ship, because otherwise you're not going to get fast enough to where you want to go. Thank you.